I'm always fascinated when someone makes a move from like one career to another, especially in the case where someone's doing something like, let's say they're a lawyer. I've heard of a case where someone was a lawyer and then they went and they decided to do production or something like that, where it's like it's harder and the pay is less, but you find out it's because the person had a passion for it. So it's really interesting when someone makes that change. And today we're happy to have Anthony Gowland joining us from Edinburgh, from the UK. That's really awesome because I love talking to people from other locations outside the US just so it can expand my knowledge. I just want to say thanks for coming on and talking with us.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So I'm curious about that. I mean, I want to talk about your game, Binaries and things like that. But can you just tell us? I mean, working like with Rockstar, Activision, working on AAA titles. Can you just tell us about making that move to Ant Workshop? Doing indie and doing stuff like that. Because everyone's talking about, oh man, I want to make it big time. And then you were up there and you said, hey, I want to do my own stuff, even if it's going to be smaller, harder at first.
Yeah, man. So I started out in the games industry, actually in like a smaller company. It was a company called Particle Systems that made games for PC. They made a game called iWar,
Hmm.
which is like a sort of space shooter back like way before the whole kind of space shooter revival thing now. Um, and that was maybe a company of maybe 30, 40 people, something like that. And that's really where I got started. And then I moved into Rockstar from there, and I was based in Rockstar's handheld development studio, Rockstar Leeds.
Hmm.
And again, it was a relatively small team. It was maybe, I think that was maybe 50 people that we had there. And we were building Liberty City Stories, Vice City Stories on the PlayStation Plus. Then we made Chinatown Wars on the Nintendo DS. Um, and it was still quite compact teams working on these things, and if you had like a lot of creative control over what was going into the game and how you were making it. Um, and then I moved from there in Rockstar. I moved and I did some work on Red Dead Redemption, and then from there onto Grand Theft Auto 5. And that's the point where moving away from like the handheld things into the big console games, you're starting to get really, really big teams. Like I'm not sure how many people we had on Red Dead or GTA 5, but like these are kind of like big 200 man plus teams across multiple continents all working on these things. Um, and that's the point where you start to feel like you've not got quite as much control over kind of the bigger picture of things. And Activision again. So when I started working at Activision, we were doing mobile, but we were working on Call of Duty for mobile. We worked on the Call of Duty Strike Team on iOS and Android, and it was relatively small teams, but Call of Duty's got so much weight behind it and so much history, and there are a lot of people involved in that franchise already. Um, you feel like you don't necessarily have as much control over it, and really kind of my whole background in games has always been I got into games through modding, through making my own Half-Life maps, through making my own Counter-Strike maps. And that's always been my background, making my own things, having a lot of control over what I'm putting out. And that's kind of why I wanted to move back into the indie space and get involved in just in kind of having my own vision for a game and releasing that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because, like you were talking about, it can take years in order to get some of these games out. And with indie games, you have, like you said, more control. And it's kind of funny because it does mirror like what some people in entertainment do. It's like, sure, I could go join some big production, but man, if I make indie movies, I have control. I can tell my story. People aren't telling me, oh, this isn't gonna sell. This isn't good. You could be much more creative. But was it also, like you said, the time where it's going to consume so much of your time that over your career you get to do actually less than in an indie setting?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, it was definitely a thing at the time. I was kind of sat at Rockstar and I was thinking about it, and so there were people that had worked on Red Dead for like kind of 5 years. Like I only worked on it right towards the end, but there were people that had worked on Red Dead Redemption for like 5 years. And if you think you've got maybe a career of I don't know 40 years or something like that until you retire, if every game takes you 5 years of working on it, like you've got a whole body of work across your whole life that's like not really a massive amount of output. Um, and then like the complete flip side of that is like obviously binaries that I'm working on now that it's just about to release. It's taken me It's taken me a year, but that's not been full-time work. Like I've been doing other sort of consultancy work. It's basically like a 6-month game, and so it's a lot quicker and a lot easier to put out. But even then, you see it in the indie space. There are people like the Stardew Valley guy was interviewed saying he'd worked for like 4 years on Stardew Valley, just like really hammering away on Stardew Valley. It's like I've got a lot of respect for people that have that much passion and that much kind of focus on being able to do that one idea. And that guy sort of was just like, okay, I'm going to make this. I know that this is what I want to do, but I'm not sure I could work on the same project for 4 years, man.
Yeah, it definitely is one of those things that it can drag you down, especially if you have all these ideas. I know it, and Binaries was one of those games that you were like, man, it was sitting in your head and you want to get it out. Before we go into that though, I wanted to ask you. I read about how you grew up with gaming and like one of your first systems was like the VIC-20. Can you tell us about that history, like growing up with those classic games that real retro gamers know about?
Yeah, man. So basically, so I'm the youngest of three kids, and because of that, we had computers in the house. So we had like a VIC-20, we had an Acorn Electron. I'm not even entirely sure whether the Acorn BBC microcomputer stuff ever made it across to the States, whether many of you viewers will actually know about them that much. But so yeah, like VIC-20, Acorn Electron, that kind of stuff. Like there's an amazing game called Repton that was like a Boulder Dash clone kind of thing on the Electron, and that that game had a map editor built into it, so you could make your own stages in it and play them. And like, so this is so far before the internet. Like you had no way of sharing these with anyone, but it was that kind of, I think that was what really sparked the fascination with making my own things. There was doing that. And then at the time, like you'd buy a magazine about like a computer magazine, but you didn't have like a demo disc on the front or anything like that. It has a listing inside it of like like the computer instructions of what you've got to type in to make this game, and it's
Yeah.
like, so you're sat there typing away and like writing this stuff, and it kind of gets into your system, and you sort of pick up on, oh, okay, this is, even though you've not invented that thing, you're picking up on like, oh, okay, that line's doing that and that line's doing that. And that's, it kind of builds into this interest and this involvement in doing things. And I think I see it today in kids today when they're playing stuff like Minecraft, and like they're actually, the creative side of it, like they're building these things, and it's sparking off that interest of like, okay, I'm doing this, and how do I build more than this, and how do I, if I wanted to do this other thing, how do I do that? And it's cool, man. I really, what's going on with like engines being available today, it's really good stuff.
Yeah, and then you moved on, like after going to university, and then you're starting with your new jobs. You're like working at places like Compaq and stuff, and that's where you started doing like the maps you were talking about, the
Yeah.
Quake map, Counter Strike maps. It's really awesome because I remember playing that back in the day. I remember also Duke Nukem. People would make those maps and upload
Oh
them like
man,
on
yeah.
AOL or something, and you're like, oh man, it's like you had unlimited games because people would create some awesome maps. I actually got into making original StarCraft maps, and then seeing how many games, and even now today on StarCraft 2, you have the arcade. Can you just tell us about that FPS aspect of creating those maps and how that led later on to wanting to design more games?
Yeah, so like I said, so I was at university and I was doing, at the time when I went to university, there weren't specific games courses, so there wasn't things like Full Sail like you've got in the States there, and we've got Abertay up here in Scotland. So I was doing just like a normal computer science course, and part of my degree had me with a work placement in Compaq. And so I was in this office. We were making a really boring email server uh, software all day. But every lunchtime and at the end of every day at work, everyone had down tools, and because we've all got these networked computers, a copy of Quake would get fired up, and we'd all sit there playing Quake World and getting involved in that. And that was really playing that and kind of wanting to explore that. That really piqued my interest then again in building my own maps and learning the what's it called? Worldcraft was the name of the program, and learning that. And that was the same year, kind of by chance. That was the same year that Half-Life came out, and Half-Life's essentially built on like a quite heavily modded version of the Quake engine, so it uses the same tools to allow you to make levels. And Half-Life just kind of blew my mind. Like Quake was good, but like Half-Life was just like this totally other thing, and it was like the sort of almost realistic setting of it kind of thing, and like just the inventiveness of the weapons and just everything about it. I loved it. And so I started building levels for that, and then Counter-Strike came out, and people was like Counter-Strike, really super early days of Counter-Strike, where it was like barely worked and really crashy early alphas and stuff like that. But it was all this thing of the communities that built up around the mapping were just absolutely amazing. Like people really getting involved in forums and really helping each other out on like ideas on how to build these different things. And yeah, I just loved it. So I really got quite involved in that. And that was when, like during my final year at university, I was kind of still really heavily into all this Counter-Strike mapping. And then, like I said, Particle Systems, the first games job that I had, they were looking for level designers. And I thought, like, well, at the time, like I was just coming up to finish my degree, and I was like, well, I'm applying for all these banks and financial institutions and stuff just to write really boring computer software, where it's like, stuff it, man. I'll fling in an application to these guys to go and work in games. And it's kind of, it was never my intention to get a job in games, but it was just, I've never done anything since, and I wouldn't want to do anything since. Yeah, it's just such a cool industry to be in. And but the worst thing was, so I was, when Planet Half-Life, all of their stuff and the Planet Quake stuff, it's all gone now. Like those whole websites,
Yeah.
like they used to host like loads of different mappers' websites, and all of that stuff's gone. So it's a bit sad.
Yeah, because I remember going to like Planet Quake and seeing things like that, and I know some of that got parlayed into other websites, but it kind of takes things away because I mean back in the day when you had the LAN parties, you had the IPX connections and things like that, where you're able to really get in there and just create these games. I mean, one of the things in Miami when I first started was with this gigantic LAN party, and it was like you had all these people bringing in these maps, and it was like, wow, you're getting exposed to all this stuff. And with all the games there are today, a lot of people end up playing the same set of games. Like you talk to people, and their library they may have 50 games in their library, but how many sequels and remakes and things like that is almost like movies. But then you have the indie game industry where you can go and you're like, wow, look at all these games, but you still have to push through. Now with Ant Workshop, when you first started, you were like mainly helping other people with games, but then you got to the point with Binaries where you said, hey, I had this game and I really want to get this out. Can you just, tell us about that process, how it led to getting Binaries about to be released on Steam in the next few weeks?
Yeah, so like you said, when I started off Ant Workshop, it was the easiest stuff was I was doing consultancy work for other people, so kind of going into other people's games, and especially because I'd just come from working at a mobile company up in Dundee, and there's a lot of interest there in the mobile games industry of people. There's a lot of people that work there that have worked on console games and that kind of thing, and maybe he's moving across and maybe don't necessarily understand mobile or are coming at it from different directions and don't have quite the design background for things. So that I was doing consultancy work for people, kind of helping them out, helping design bits and pieces. And but at the same time, like any time that I had some free time, like this idea of like, okay, I can I can build binaries, or it was called Tealy and Orangey back then, but it's like I can build this thing in Unity, and it was kind of like a steadily creeping idea of a thing, and sort of slowly building it up. And then I got a little bit of, I was actually quite lucky and got applied for a bit of small bit of funding that I'm allowed to use in marketing. And there's a big game show over here for independent developers. It's in London called EGX Resd. And so I applied to for some funding, marketing funding, to be able to show my game at that, and got that. And then that has basically been the catalyst for, okay, that's a deadline there of this is kind of when I've got to have this thing for sure. So let's really just kind of focus down on getting this done and polishing it up and getting it out there. And I'm just so I'm really happy with how it's all kind of come together. In the end, I feel like the polish that's in the game there is something that actually really stands it apart from kind of like a lot of people's kind of indie stuff.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the gameplay? Because it's really interesting how it's like you have to concentrate. It's a puzzle type game, and it's one of those things where you've seen lots of puzzle games, but when someone has the opportunity to take it and change like how it works, like you said, controlling the two different spears at the same time, and some can go over some terrain, some can't. It brings more interesting aspects to a genre of games that people may be used to, but that they're like, wow, this is different. Can you just tell us a little bit about the gameplay experience that people have when they get a chance to play it?
Yeah, sure. So the idea with binaries then is, like you say, you've got two characters that you're controlling at exactly the same time with exactly the same set of controls. So when you press right, both characters move right. When you jump, they both try and jump. Um, and then laid on top of that, there are these levels. So one of the characters is blue, one of the characters is orange, and every item in the level is either blue or orange, and they interact. They'll only interact with things of their own colour. So an orange spike is deadly to the orange ball, but the blue guy is completely immune to that. And what you end up with is this situation where you've really got to kind of pay attention to, like, okay, if I jump now, is one of them going to hit something? Is the other one going to survive? What's going on? It's kind of like, I always liken it to, if you imagined like playing two different Super Meat Boy levels at exactly the same time using one controller. It's like, that's kind of where you've got to get your headspace around, because it's like Super Meat Boy and M Plus really been the things that have influenced me a lot in kind of the type of thing that I wanted to make. Something that's like, it's quite, you'll die a lot. Like it's really hard. You will die a lot in it, but you'll die and then you immediately restart back over. It's really fast paced still. And you've got this quite tight loop of just like repeat, and then you're gradually sort of learning it, and you're gradually starting to spot these patterns in how things move in the level, and how you should jump from one thing to the other, and how to kind of get around the different levels in it.
Yeah, and so as far as I mean, it's 101 levels, so that's a lot as well. And then you also have the different, if you want even a harder challenge, wow. I mean, it's already sounds like it's difficult, but you want more, then you can go against the clock, your own times and things like that. So I mean, something where it has not only a long beginning just for how many levels and stuff you get, but then it has more challenge if you say, hey, I did this really well. Oh, really? Now beat this time.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole thing is got time rankings on every level. So it's like you can take it really slow, you can take it really carefully, and you can complete a level. But if it takes you 5 minutes to complete a level, the game will just be like, whatever, man. That's nothing. You can complete this level this level can be completed in 10 seconds or something like that. And that's the point where you turn around and go, what? How do you do that? Like some of the times, I promise you, every time it's in the game, you can complete it, because every time I have completed, like I've passed it. But some of the times, like even I've set times and then I've kind of gone back to them a week later and kind of forgotten the trick, or forgotten the route of how I got through a particular level. And I look at it and go, you can't do this level in 10 seconds. I surely haven't managed to do this level in 10 seconds. But at the same time, so the whole game, originally when I made it, it had linear progression. So it's like you finish one level, you go straight on to the next level, bam, 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 bam. What I was finding was people were finding like the difficulty curve on it really tricky because some people find some bits of it hard, some people find other bits of it hard. So it's depending on what the challenge in a particular level was, people were getting stuck in totally different places. And then it occurred to me to build. Actually, the game's got like this sort of free-form map in it. So when you finish a level, the game unlocks the other levels that surround it. And then it's like, okay, so you've finished that level, and maybe now you've got a choice of 3 other levels to go to. So you try that one, and you hammer away at that one, and you get kind of getting stuck on it. You can't do it. So it's like, okay, I can back out of that, and I've still got 2 other levels there to try. So it's like I can play one of these other levels instead and make some progress in one of those levels, finish that one, and you basically end up winding your own way around the map. And have so many other levels kind of available to you to try, but like when people play it, they never really feel like completely stuck because you've always kind of got this option of, okay, I'll just back out of the map, pick a totally different level, kind of reset myself, settle myself down, and kind of learn a different challenge on it.
Now, I was reading that how it said that originally, like the name Tealy and Orangey, it's like you had to change it to binaries because binary sounds cooler, and you didn't like that. I don't know. I think both could have worked. I mean, I think that both would have been either sweet. I mean, binaries is cool, but I don't know. Tealy and Orangey could have worked as well, right?
Yeah, so the kind of the with Tilly and Orangey, people always said to me like, oh, when they saw the name, it made them think of like a kind of '90s platform game like Banjo Kazooie or something like that. Like
Right.
they
Yeah.
always think like two characters with big sort of big eyes on them, kind of thing. So yeah, and then so the other thing was as well, people kind of always got the order of it mixed up. So like I'll get people that know the original name that say to me like, oh, you man, that Binaries name isn't as good. You should have kept that orange and teal name. And it's like it wasn't called orange. You can't get the name right. If you can't get the name right, you're kind of proving my point that the name wasn't right.
That's true, and it is about marketing, getting the name out there. So it's important. So I see it works like that. So as far as Steam, people will be able to get it early April, April 4th, I believe, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's released on Steam for Windows and Mac on Steam on April the 4th. It's coming to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One later in the year.
Awesome. Well, I hope that people will go check this game out. It looks awesome, especially if you like any type of puzzle games, and especially support indie developers. Because I'm always hearing people talking
Yes,
about, oh,
support.
triple A's they're all stale and stagnant, and we need new blood. Well, here's some new blood right here. So go out and support that game. Get on Steam when it comes out. Anthony, thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a pleasure.